Hello everybody and welcome back to a brand new live stream. Make sure you guys hit that like button down below and subscribe to the channel if you are new. So I said I would be streaming 2 to 3 times a week, and it does seem as if that is going to be the schedule. I think Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Sundays are going to be the schedule moving forward. Now we'll see what you guys think, but I think that is probably the best schedule. We'll sprinkle in 2 to 3 regular scheduled videos along the way as well in the coming months. I think that's going to be the channel schedule moving forward because we do have a lot to talk about, and I do think that it is good to engage with the audience more, especially at a time where it's kind of a little dry politically, but not too dry because we do still have a decent amount to cover, even though this is kind of an off year. Although we are still less than 12 months away, less than 11 months away even, from the Iowa caucus, which will start and kick off the 2024 election cycle. So we have a lot to cover. We have a lot slowly heating up, and I'm sure we're going to get a lot more people in the coming months leading up to that, and you're going to have more 2024 news coverage for certain. But what I will say is that the race is increasingly heating up. You have the 2024 field, or even people that are speculated to be loosely associated with the 2024 field, maybe some vice presidential candidates thrown there in the mix. These types of people are now answering the important questions ahead of Iowa that we need to know. We're going to talk about the Tucker Carlson questionnaire that he sent out to all of these 2024 presidential hopefuls and what their takes were on the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Because back in the day, 2016, 2012, even going all the way back into the 2000s, the main conflict there was in the Middle East. And we know this. But still, now the climate has shifted. You see, we're pulling troops out of Afghanistan. Trump withdrew here and there as well in the Middle East from certain places. And it does seem as if the area of foreign policy conflict has now shifted from the Middle East to Eastern Europe, where you do have the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and you do have the entire media and military industrial complex just jumping and salivating at the thought of war. And you also have the America First wing of the Republican Party pushing back against that. Where do the candidates, or even some of these speculative candidates or people that may not even run, I think Greg Abbott and people like Kristi Noem were included in the mix, where do they exactly stand on the issue of Russia and Ukraine? We're going to be talking about that tonight. We're also going to be talking about Donald Trump in Iowa. He held a rally in Iowa. He did attack Ron DeSantis. He also outlined his agenda for 2024 in what I believe to be a very clear, concise manner. And to a lot of people who actually watched the speech, whether it was on Rumble or wherever, it does seem as if I can't think of a reason for why Donald Trump should not be the nominee watching him, especially when you delve into the content of what was truly being said, not just the energy level or whatever, or, he was inserting jokes here and there. No, the content, the policy content that he's putting forward is definitely something that we haven't even seen from him before, even in 2016, where he had his magical run. And then we have to talk about the state of Idaho. This is a little bit of a lesser-known story, but I wanted to throw it in the mix as well, because we always cover the GOP failures within the establishment on this channel, and I think we're going to continue to cover it so long as the GOP establishment remains broken. Yes, we've made a lot of progress, one could say, in recent years to repeal and replace a lot of these bad actors and these losers, but still, the Idaho GOP calling for amnesty, calling for more foreign workers, it's insane. It is a mess, especially in a deep red state. And obviously, you have some people that are going to be pushing back against that because, as we saw in the primaries in 2022, lots of these rhinos were successfully primaried out of the state legislature, but there is a lot of work to do. So make sure you guys like the stream down below. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't. Make sure you hit the bell if you have not hit the bell yet. And make sure you guys send in super chats along the way, because we will be having this discussion. I'm sure you guys have a lot of questions for me. I'm sure I have a lot of answers for you guys. So make sure to send in the questions via super chat and we'll get to them all. So I think it's important that we start off talking about foreign policy. Now, I'm kind of going to be reading a little bit of this article because I did see the stances that these candidates brought forward on the issue. And there's a lot of questions here. There's a lot to get to. A lot of candidates, I think Vivek Ramaswamy or whatever his name was, is actually on the list for some reason, even though he's not really a serious candidate. He's a very minor candidate. He's kind of like a populist Inc. type. He does seem to say some good things here and there on domestic policy. He's very weak on immigration. I think one of his campaign promises and issues is actually to raise the number. It's insanity there. But in terms of the issues here, we're going to get and delve into this right here, because Tucker asked the question, because this is a Tucker Carlson thing, because we know Tucker on foreign policy, he's arguably one of the very few, if not the only, true America First voice over at Fox that has a show. He's one of those people. And he's the one that was asking these questions. He's the one that really wants to know from these candidates where they stand. Trump, DeSantis, especially DeSantis, because Ron DeSantis has a lot of question marks on his foreign policy record, and it's definitely murky. Now, we'll get into his responses for sure, and definitely it's arguably a mixed bag when we get into it and delve into the details. But still, you know, you see a governor, he's being propped up for reasons that we know, but he's also being touted as being very good on domestic policy, fighting in the culture war, these cultural issues, and taking a stand here and there. But when it comes to national security issues, such as immigration, foreign policy, trade, even like energy nationwide, that when it comes down to that, we don't really know where Ron DeSantis truly stands on a lot of these issues. We really don't. And in Congress, his voting record was a little bit murky. It was a little bit iffy. You had some solid votes here and there, and then you had some not so good votes, and then you had some really not so good votes here and there back when he was in Congress before he became a governor. But still, wanting to delve into what the responses were for this, because Tucker asked the question, is opposing Russia in Ukraine a vital American national strategic interest? And then Trump said no, but it is for Europe, adding that European allies should be paying more than what we are or equal. It's a very straight to the point type of answer. He's saying that it's not our problem necessarily. It affects Europe more than it affects us if we're going to play this whole, it's an issue type of game. And he's saying that Europe needs to be paying their fair share. And he negotiated during his presidency, obviously, with NATO to get those countries to pay a little bit more into it because they were getting by for so long without paying. He negotiated it. And he's saying that this is a recurring problem. And definitely these countries need to be paying for their own protection. It's not really our problem. We're not really in the region. We don't need to be pushing Russia directly into the arms of China and then creating this two-headed beast that's going to be out there to effectively destroy us. That's basically it. And DeSantis went out there. He told Carlson, while the U.S. has many vital national interests, being further entangled in a territorial dispute is not one of them. So it's a very vague answer, one could say. But I can't personally, on the surface level, find anything wrong with that answer directly. You talk about it. We don't have any business becoming more entangled in this territorial dispute. And it's ironic because a lot of the neocons were not really happy with him calling it a territorial dispute. And you had a lot of the neocons go out there and trash him for it, saying, oh, well, this is basically, you're just calling Nazi Germany back in the 1930s and 40s a territorial dispute. And it's like, not really the point. They miss the point consistently. That's the only thing they can do. And World War II is consistently used as this tool by the military-industrial complex, by the deep state in order to encourage more conflict, because they consistently will perpetuate the idea that we have to get involved everywhere and that we're going to be the police and we're going to be the good guys and we're preventing World War II or whatever, when in reality we're just pushing them directly into the arms of China, and that's going to create World War III. And in this day and age, that could be far more destructive, but that's beside the point. Noam actually answered the question as well, saying the primary threat to the United States is China instead of Russia. Ramaswamy said it's not vital to oppose Russia, while stressing it is vital for us to have energy independence, and that had Europe relied more on us instead of Russia, the invasion may not have happened. Pence, on the other hand, actually gave the worst answers. And I feel vindicated on Mike Pence, because I've been somebody that has opposed Mike Pence for the presidency far before the whole Jan 6, 2021 incident with the, not having the courage type of thing. Because I knew from the get-go that Pence was a typical boring career politician. He served a purpose for Trump at the time. He helped get more evangelicals on board. He helped get more traditional Republicans on board so they could stomach Trump, because Trump's popularity within the GOP back then in the day was not exactly that high. So picking Pence at the right time, one could argue, would have been the right decision. However, now we know that that's not the case, and propping this guy up to becoming the next president would be a total disaster. And had Trump gotten the second term, won 2020, obviously served 4 years, Pence would arguably be the front runner, which I don't think that would have been a good thing. So one could say that's a silver lining in this whole thing, is that now Pence is not really that well liked within the GOP base. And you could say he's good here and there. Oh, he's a social conservative. He's good on this issue. He's good on that issue. Okay, fine. There's a lot of people like that out there. And you talk about his foreign policy, not really in lockstep with Trump or anything remotely America first. This guy's going out there and saying that we need to tout the Reagan doctrine, and there's no room for Putin apologists in the Republican Party. This is not America's war, but if Putin is not stopped, we need to send our own troops, and we need to fund NATO and do all of this nonsense. And he's basically buying into this whole, if you happen to sit there and act like Putin is not this major threat, or you're not actively anti-Putin 24/7, then you're a Putin apologist. That is how these people think. We've seen this in real time when the initial invasion was happening, and anybody who was like sitting on the sidelines and saying, okay, well, this is a little bit more complicated. We don't need to be rushing to conclusions here. We don't need to be funding Ukraine with billions of dollars. Those are the same people that would have called you a Putin apologist. That's basically all it comes down to. And Pence is a neocon. And Pence is going out there answering with arguably the worst answer possible, arguably on par with Nikki Haley's answer. And then goes on, Scott, I believe this is Tim Scott, saying it's a vital national interest. Okay, who cares what Chris Christie has to say? I don't even care what Chris Christie has to say about this. But either way, Haley goes on to say America's far better off with a Ukraine victory than a Russian victory, including avoiding wider war or whatever. Okay, now there's another question here. He asks, what specifically is our objective in Ukraine, and how will we know when we've achieved it? Trump said the objective is to help and secure Europe, but Europe isn't helping itself, and it's unfair for us to largely foot the bill, especially because Europe and a lot of these European nations are taking advantage of us on trade and all of these other things. That is correct. It's very straight to the point. He gave shorter answers, one could say, than a lot of these other candidates did. DeSantis said that peace is the objective, while Pence told Carlson victory for Ukraine and having its sovereignty restored is the objective. Okay, so it's interesting to see this. DeSantis is kind of giving these non-answers, one could say, and I'm not saying that to be facetious here, because he's basically saying that, and you could argue that his answers were politically advantageous for him, and they are, honestly. These are solid answers compared to what you would be expecting for somebody like Ron DeSantis, who has been a part of the political system for well over a decade now. But he's going out there, he's giving very vague answers. Peace is the objective. Didn't condemn aid necessarily. And peace being the objective could mean a lot of things. Russia winning, and after that, you see peace there. Ukraine just fending Russia off. That could mean peace to a lot of people. So it really comes down to just a lot of different things, because how you're going to achieve peace is going to be determinant on several factors here. One could say in giving Russia the territories they want in Ukraine is peace. And one could say that that would be an effective way to end the war. So we'll have to see what happens. But either way, it's interesting. Now it goes on and on. What is the limiting of funding and material you would be willing to send to the government of Ukraine? And then DeSantis says the U.S. should not provide assistance that could require the deployment of American troops or enable Ukraine to engage in offensive operations beyond its borders, adding that providing F-16s and long-range missiles would be off the table. Again, he also says our citizens are also entitled to know how the billions of taxpayer dollars are being utilized in Ukraine. So again, he doesn't say that he's against aid to Ukraine. He doesn't say he's against all these, packages that send billions upon billions of dollars to Ukraine. Again, but he's also having the appearance where he's taking the back seat, having the appearance where he's kind of standing up for America in this conflict. And it's arguably very questionable, but he is a very skilled politician, and this is what I'm saying, and this is the only reason why he's polling at a decent amount. It's the only reason why he really does tend to be the one that's being propped up. He's the only reason why, or that's the only reason why he's really posing even a long shot threat to Donald Trump for this nomination. It's very interesting. And Trump said that it would strongly depend on him meeting with Putin, but stressed Europe must pay. He goes on. Pence said he doesn't support sending a blank check, but then has talked about, we still need to be funding them. We're not going to reduce support without consequence or whatever. So who knows? It goes on. And then they all say no regime change in Russia. DeSantis says Putin's successor would be even more ruthless. Given Russia's economy and currency, do you believe the U.S. sanctions would have been effective? Trump says no, they have not been effective. DeSantis actually had the correct take, one could say, in terms of the fact that our sanctions and our policies have been driving Russia into this de facto alliance with China, and China has not been abiding by any embargo. So basically, you're propping up Russia and China to this anti-American force, and you're basically delving the world off into World War III by the way that we've taken this conflict and just the way that we haven't been able to sit down, Putin and Zelensky or whoever, in a room together, get the conflict out of the way. Because that's how Donald Trump handled things during his presidency. He would take these world leaders that you would never, ever anticipate to be in the same room with each other, and he got them in the room. He got a lot of deals done. You saw deals done in the Middle East that you probably would never have seen done under any other president. You saw him himself go meet with Kim Jong-un in a very peaceful setting and get along with these world leaders that usually have not really been seen as too friendly to the United States. But still, nevertheless, what did he do? He went out there and he did what he could do to get deals done, kind of slowing the conflict, one could say, kind of scaling back the hostility with North Korea. Remember 2017, people were worried that North Korea was going to nuke us, and then 2018 came around and he was sitting with Donald Trump in a summit. And obviously it's not like peace is completely gotten done there, but it's a lot less of a threat now than it was back then. And that we know. And this whole peace through strength thing with Donald Trump's foreign policy does kind of still reign supreme. And I think that that's very telling. And Trump gave answers that were very short, very straight, very to the point. DeSantis had better answers than you would expect, but it kind of was in this roundabout way. He doesn't exactly deny the fact that he does support funding with some certain aid, and it just leaves a lot of question marks because it does kind of come off like, he's saying the right thing. It's tested among focus groups within the Republican Party, but Is it exactly genuine? And that's what we're going to talk about here, because you look at his past record, you look at who's exactly in his circle, not just who's funding him, but who's in his circle in Florida. Everybody wants to talk about Donald Trump's advisors being bad, and I've talked about it many times because I was not a fan of many people in Trump's administration. And now Trump has said recently at his Iowa rally, and we'll get to that as well, that he's not a fan of a lot of the weak people who were a part of his administration. But what we do know is that you look at one of his lead advisors, Christina Pushaw, who's also leading this, troll farm, essentially on Twitter. All of these people that are allegedly being paid, even the Daily Beast has covered this, to just A-log Trump and his most loyal supporters, including myself, by the way, 24/7 on Twitter.com, and just promote the idea of a DeSantis 2024 presidential run. And that's true. And she is somebody who said the best night of her political life was Zelensky's inauguration, not Trump's inauguration or Trump's victory or even her own boss's victory or re-election victory. It was Zelensky's victory in Ukraine, and all they're doing is tweeting this nonsense on the night of the Russian invasion back in February of last year. And it kind of does show what's going on here. So these other questions here, I think there's one more question that they asked. Do you believe the U.S. faces the risk of nuclear war with Russia? Trump says it depends who the president of the United States is. DeSantis says that escalated U.S. involvement would risk explicitly drawing the U.S. into the conflict, et cetera, et cetera. So very political answers there. But what I will say, and I know some people are going to say that this is nitpicking or whatever, but you look at the fact there's a little bit of a change of tune now that he's running for president, now that he's, sensing a pulse in the base, because he could do that better than a lot of these Republican politicians can, like Haley, like Pence, like a lot of these other neocons, these other losers, whatever. DeSantis actually understands that the base has opinions that have changed from 2012, per se, on Russia, on foreign policy, on cultural issues even. And that's why he's going out there and he's giving more Trumpian answers. The wave is blowing, the wind is blowing in the correct direction, which is a good thing, and you could thank Trump for that. But furthermore, there's a lot of things that we really don't know about his record. And you look into it. And what was he saying last year around this time? He was saying that he is an authoritarian gas station attendant with old nukes or whatever, and he's just going out there, and all he's doing, and all the energy he's doing is just blasting Putin. You talk about, throwing him to the wolves, which is essentially throwing him into this alliance with China, which is going to be detrimental to the United States. Well, he's throwing out the same rhetoric verbatim that John McCain would throw out there about Putin, saying, oh, it's just a glorified gas station masquerading as a country. Then what did DeSantis say last year? He said that he's an authoritarian gas station attendant with old nuclear weapons, whatever. So what does that exactly tell you? It tells you he kind of blows the way the wind does. And that's true. And that could be a positive thing in the future. If you actually drain the swamp, if you fully gut the apparatus within the GOP, if you are a blow the way the wind does kind of person, yeah, you're going to need a lot of those people. You're going to need them in the future because some of those people are going to be needed for their connections. They're going to be needed to take up positions. They're going to be needed for their roles if they really just blow the way the wind does. However, if you're talking about a leader, especially one at the federal level, running to be the executive of the highest office in arguably the entire world, you're going to need somebody who's going to be strong, somebody who's going to be proven, somebody who's really not propped up by all the worst people in the GOP, and somebody who exactly just will be able to go out there and not be bought and will just do the right thing from day one. And that's what it comes down to. And that's why I think a lot of people don't trust DeSantis. That's why Trump has seen an uptick in the polls recently. A lot of people like what he's done as governor, but there's still a lot that we don't know. And even though he's given good answers here and there on foreign policy, and it's funny to see the neocons have a meltdown about it, seeing DeSantis like give these answers that one could potentially skew to be a little bit more pro-Russia than your average Republican politician. There's still a lot that we just don't know, even now. And he's kind of used this backseat approach where he doesn't really talk about a lot of these issues. So when it's primary time, if he does decide to jump in the race with Trump, he's going to be able to go out there and talk very similarly on these issues. And that's the way I see it. Some people might disagree. Some people might say that he's being 100% genuine. And it's like, really? Well, there's just a lot that we still haven't seen in action. And you could say, well, what about Trump in 2016? He was not proven or whatever. And the problem is that Donald Trump for his entire career, maybe not on like a lot of the like traditional conservative issues, like he flip-flopped on abortion. Yes, he did. He flip-flopped on gun control here and there throughout his career, etc. There were a couple issues, but when it came to immigration, when it came to American exceptionalism, when it came to trade, protecting jobs, when it came to foreign policy, he was pretty much in lockstep with his entire position going back to the 1970s, to the 1980s. And he was that outsider who led a movement that essentially fought for the American people, that answered directly to the American people, so much so to the point where there were a lot of people who were just willing to take the gamble because they were so fed up with the political system. And then in 4 years, it wasn't all pretty for 4 years. It wasn't all, perfect, one could say, obviously, and we know that, and that's the only reason why I think there's good faith people that question Trump in 2024 from time to time for something other than like age concerns, which again still has higher energy than most Republican politicians. But either way, does seem like there is kind of this change in Trump as well. Like I said, we're probably not going to get 2016 energy because he's 8 years older now than he was in 2016, or at least he will be in 2024 when it's campaign season. But the content, he's not obsessing over past grievances, one could say. He's not even obsessing too much over 2020. Which a lot of people have criticized him for doing so. What he is talking about are the things that matter on the campaign trail when he's in the state of Iowa, where he was last night doing a campaign rally. Had a very large crowd. He did. And he's arguably, when you talk about the mistakes that he's made, what do they say? The riots, whatever. The riots and all these bad people in the administration. What did he say in Iowa? He agreed that he's made mistakes and he's willing to rectify them. So that's not a legitimate argument that could really be used against Donald Trump at this point. He said that you're supposed to be asked by the governor or the mayor to come in. The next time, I'm not waiting, which again, that's true. Politically, it would have been a gamble to try and use the Insurrection Act to the best of his ability. He could have been impeached on the spot knowing the time ahead of an election cycle. And they would have tried. It would not have arguably been the best politics. Same thing goes for the whole firing Fauci thing. Fauci had like an 80-something% approval rating, according to most polling. Would it have been the right thing to do? Yes, but politically speaking, they're getting mad at Trump for doing things that would make him, their favorite word to use, uneluctable. I think he should have probably sent in the feds as much as he possibly could. I think you could argue that was an L. Should not have listened to people like Kushner and people like Kushner in his administration. But he said, next time, I'm not waiting. Again, there you go, right there. Shouldn't have waited to begin with, but you see the acknowledgement right there. He's not going to say, oh, I'm sorry. He's not going to put himself in a position of weakness and cower and apologize. But what he's going to say is, you know what, next time we're doing this instead, because that arguably didn't work. And that's true. And he also said, He signifies that his administration will be much stronger in 24 because in 2016 he was a total outsider who had to rely on some members of the establishment. This is true. Had to rely on Ryan to get legislation passed. He had to rely on McConnell. This is a problem with being an outsider. It's good to be an outsider, but you have to know how to navigate the swamp. And honestly, he had a lot of swamp around him, but now he knows how to navigate it better. He said, when I went there, I didn't know a lot of people, but I know them all now. And he's saying that he's going to do much different things, and he's going to have the best people possible in his administration that he possibly can have. And he's going to cast aside these rhinos, people like Kushner, people like Bolton, a lot of those types from his administration, the neocons, the weak conservatives or the fake conservatives. They're going to be purged. You're going to have an authentically conservative, an authentically America First administration if you have Donald Trump. If you have Ron DeSantis, who are you going to have in your administration? Ukraine First, Christina Pushaw? Are you going to have the press secretary or the deputy press secretary of DeSantis who said that he wanted Trump to be impeached over a lie and then deleted the tweets when called out for it? Is that who's going to be in your administration? Because those are the people in DeSantis' administration down in Florida. They're holding back some of his agenda there in a state that you have like almost like a supermajority Republican state legislature or whatever. What do you think's going to happen at the federal level, especially when he's relying on a lot of out-of-state money from these traditional GOP neocon donors to become president of the United States? What's going to happen then? That's my argument against Ron DeSantis here. And like I said, you can be a good governor. You can be an asset. He's culturally doing what he can do to mold the state. Obviously, it's not been entirely perfect, and we know that. He's passed some decent legislation. Some of it is overhyped, like the big tech bill. Some of it is overrated, just like the E-Verify, but still steps in the right direction, one could say. But that doesn't necessarily mean that he's going to be perfect president, even when he's not an entirely perfect governor. I mean, you could say he's a lot better than a lot of these other Republican governors, and I'll agree with you because we have a lot of bad Republican leadership across this country. We have a lot of weak Republican governors, and that much is true. So furthermore, let's see what else Trump said. He said that Ron was a disciple of Paul Ryan, reminds me of Mitt Romney. And then he said, I don't think you're going to be doing too well here, but we're going to find out, because he's talking about his past stances on trade and his past stances on entitlements. And definitely, the stances on entitlements thing is a bigger deal than people think. That's why Blake Masters underperformed a lot of candidates in Arizona. One of the reasons, obviously, funding was the biggest one. He was shafted big time. Don Bolduc in New Hampshire, underperforming vastly. And not a lot of people know this about DeSantis, so it really hasn't affected him. But even in 2018, that was one of the things that held him back against a literal socialist, or a self-described socialist that was endorsed in the primary by Bernie Sanders. He endorsed Bernie Sanders. Literal meth head, by the way. Total crazy person. That was a pure toss-up race. And I know it was a D plus whatever year, but I mean, Florida's kind of been immune to these wave years, and that we know. And even then, Trump had to send in a lot of his people to go down to Florida to help out his campaign. So you could thank Donald Trump for DeSantis even getting elected in Florida in the first place. But still, what does remain the same is that at the federal level, in Congress, he was very close to Paul Ryan. He was in the Freedom Caucus, but he really wasn't really a notable or like the best member of the Freedom Caucus. He was no Andy Biggs. He was no Gosar. He was no, I don't know exactly who else you would say, like Scott Perry even. But he has a lot in common with Romney, because both of them are supposedly going to be picked because they're the eluctable answer. And both lack charisma significantly compared to somebody like Donald Trump. I will say that. So that's the way I see it, 100% of the way. And you talk about Trump in Iowa, I think he did a very good job at his rally. I'd like to see more of the Iowa Trump. I'd like to see more of the CPAC Trump moving forward. Trump is not necessarily above criticism either. Although all of the worst people in the GOP that want to make the GOP of old, who exactly is their candidate? They're not the ones lining up behind Trump. Trump has a couple of cringeworthy people that are latching to him to grift, like Lindsey Graham. And Trump goes and speaks on stage with Lindsey Graham, and what does he say? He says directly to Graham's face, he's like, I don't agree with him on everything. I appreciate his support, though, which, again, you have a senator and early primary state. I mean, what do you expect him to do? Disavow? I mean, I'd rather have him not rally with him. Don't get me wrong there. But you look at who's supporting DeSantis. You have like Jeb Bush endorsing him. And I think that that's far more egregious than somebody like Lindsey Graham, who we know is a grifter. And Trump knows he called him a rhino last year. He basically said he's a friend of his and he's a nice guy, but he's a rhino. That's what he said. That's the way I see it too. And that's pretty much it. So we're going to get into super chats, but I first want to get to the Idaho thing. So make sure you guys like the stream down below. Make sure you guys subscribe if you haven't. And make sure you guys send super chats if you guys want me to answer any questions that you guys may have. So we will be talking about that. But I want to talk about Idaho because you have Republicans. These are not Democrats. These are Republicans in the state of Idaho, of all states. Very Republican state, R+30. You see a massive, authentically conservative takeover of much of the state legislature, but not all, in the primaries that took place in 2022. Now, they want to flood the labor market with more foreign workers and approve amnesty. So they basically say, oh, we need E-Verify. They say we need E-Verify, which makes sure that you don't hire illegal aliens. So that's the good part. But then they want to expand the visas for foreign workers so they can import these people to take mostly working class, blue collar jobs away in the state of Idaho. Again, these are not like Republicans in the Northeast. This is Idaho. And this is what they're focusing on in the state of Idaho. They're focusing on making sure that you can have more illegals pour in. They're not focusing on opposing their rhino leadership at times. They're not focusing on passing legislation that's going to positively impact the people of Idaho. What are they doing? They're talking about increasing guest worker programs and begging Joe Biden to increase the amount of immigrants to pour into Idaho. At this point, what difference does it make if you have a piece of paper or you don't have a piece of paper? Because the same logic persists. Oh, they have a piece of paper, but they're still working for these corporations. They're lowering wages. They're taking jobs away from Americans. They'll say, well, Americans don't want to do those jobs, and it's because you're driving down the wages of them by replacing them with these foreign workers. That's why. And these are jobs in construction. These are jobs in manufacturing. These are jobs in hospitality. Americans do, by the way, want those jobs. It's pretty obvious. And you have a lot of people that are moving to the state of Idaho from all across the country because it's such a great place to live, to the point where it's like, yeah, honestly, you don't need to be increasing the labor pool by importing all of these foreign workers. You really don't need to. And what is that going to do? It's going to be good for the corporations. They're going to lower the wages. What is it going to do? It's going to change the state. It's going to change the demography. It's going to change the electorate. It's going to hurt Republicans in future elections. You already see the county of Boise moving left. It might even flip soon, potentially from red to blue. The state of Idaho, obviously, is not at risk of flipping. If anything, it might be moving further to the right overall because of other parts of like northern Idaho growing and having more Republicans move there. But still, an absolute mess what is taking place just in the Republican Party. And obviously, the senator who could have been primaried out but was not primaried out, Mike Crapo, what did he exactly do? He tried and he failed to pass a farm worker amnesty. So this is what Republicans are focusing on. They're not focusing on securing the border. They're not focusing on raising wages for American citizens. They're not focusing on increasing decent paying jobs and bringing back the American dream. No, they're focusing on making sure that they could force all of these workers in from all over the world. And they're going to be enriching Idaho, and they're going to be lowering wages, and they're going to be doing all sorts of things, and they're going to be voting Democrat 70-30, 80-20. That's all it comes down to. And it is a disaster. Why? Because who exactly is funding these people? These big businesses who are these 2004 style weak Republicans. That's all they are. So we will get to super chats. I'm sure you guys have some. We'll get to answering those. And we will be talking about whatever the chat wants to. And we'll start off with the super chats here. So let's go up there to the top of the chat and let's work our way down and let's answer any questions that you guys have sent in. So without further ado, we are going to dive in when I can find the first super chat here. Here we go. Mole Playing Rough says, what music do you use for your documentaries? I'm actually editing one as we speak. I'm going to work on it more after the stream. But it's all the YouTube creative library or whatever it's called. I don't really use a whole lot of like outside music. I might change that up if I find some like non-copyright music that's pretty solid, but I don't know. Also, could you do a tier list on prominent conservative figures like Mark Levin, Hannity, etc.? I've thought about that, and I've had people ask me to do that, although we can make quite a few enemies in the process, and I don't really know. Yeah, we're going to have like a conservative YouTuber tier list too while we're at it. And yeah, I don't know. Like I said, it would be interesting. It could also make some enemies, and I don't know if that's really something that we want to do. But thank you for the super chat. Up next, let's find the next super chat. Let's see. Sam Madsen says, often it feels like I'm the only one who is able to look at Trump versus DeSantis pragmatically. And obviously, you're going to have to look at it pragmatically. If there are areas where DeSantis is outflanking Trump, it does need to be said. I just personally can't see any. He does do that because I view him as the skilled politician who is going out there and giving answers that will placate the base. They may even impress the base at times, but even then they're ambiguous to the point where it's not going to turn off enough of his entrenched donor support base who may not ordinarily agree with that statement if Trump, for example, made that statement. And that's the way I see it. And the main issues of our time, obviously you talk about the four Trumpian issues. They're not like the biggest issues overall, but the Trump issues that he brought to the forefront, obviously foreign policy is a big one. Immigration is a big one. Trade is a big one. And then I would say that draining the swamp or whatever would be the fourth plank of that. And there's more. Obviously, you talk about the cultural degradation. Those are issues that we care about a lot, even though they're not really being talked about by Trump or somebody like DeSantis either. One could say DeSantis is engaged in that culture war or whatever here and there, but Donald Trump is also jumping in the whole discussion as well recently about that. So we'll really see what happens on that front. But more super chats. Sam Madsen also says, you say Trump could have been impeached if he took a stand against the riots. How many R's would have cucked and voted to impeach in that case? Well, I'm not saying he would be removed from office. That would be ridiculous. But in terms of, if he actually went out there night one and did the right thing, I would not be surprised if Dems tried to impeach him in the House. It may have failed, honestly, in the House, and you probably wouldn't have really seen many Republicans vote to impeach. Maybe some people running in like D+10, D+15 districts or whatever, but I don't think there really were that many. Maybe like you could say Mike Garcia would fit that bill, but he would never vote to impeach. So I don't really know if any would have. Because, maybe Romney in the Senate or something like that, but it would have been the most ridiculous trial ever. Knight says, I don't get why you say Hawley is better than DeSantis. Being a good senator doesn't make them a good president either. At least governors are executives, unlike senators. Well, what I'm saying is the issues that governors focus on are vastly different. One could say like economic issues. Okay, I don't really have a problem with DeSantis's economic views in Florida. I don't think that he's really done a poor job. I think that when it comes to the national level economic policy, when it comes to things like trade, that's a whole nother issue. You talk about foreign policy, trade, etc. Those are things that Hawley's been talking about his entire senatorial career and even before that. And he also had a very good record as Attorney General. It was very tough in Missouri. You could look into that. Went after a lot of these corporations that a lot of conservatives and Republicans really, would not go after in terms of establishment Republicans go. But like I said, I think that you talk about the national issues. Being a senator means you've focused on those national issues more so than a governor. Now, I'm not saying that we can't have governors become presidents or whatever, but I'm just saying DeSantis's record at the national level has existed in Congress, and it was not exactly that good. it wasn't bad compared to a lot of Republicans, no doubt, but a lot of Republicans are people that I really wouldn't want to prop up and lead a ticket, especially in this day and age. Compared to Republicans back then, you could say average to maybe slightly above average Republican congressman, and then solid governor, but who's being propped up by all of the wrong people to lead the party at the national level and challenge the guy who got him that position in the first place for the wrong reasons. They could talk about electability, but look at his policy. Is his policy really that electable? And if you're dividing the party, your electability is going to go down vastly because of that fact alone. I mean, that part is true in and of itself, especially on the Republican Party, because Republicans can never seem to unite. Democrats, obviously, they do. Republicans, not so much. And when Democrats didn't, like in 2016, you saw lower turnout overall. Well, Donald Trump defeated Hillary Clinton. So Buck Hunter 431 says, what do you think of Real American? I have no problem with Real American politics over there. Tucson Paleocon says, rhinos will destroy wages and families for cheap oranges. This is also true. Although how cheap will the oranges exactly be? Would you rather pay 10 cents less per orange, or would you rather just rob the families of this country of the traditional American dream? That's a good question. A lot of our oranges are imported anyways. They're imported from Mexico, which is fine. You can have trade as long as it's free trade. I mean, as long as it's fair trade, that's what I'm saying. Free trade, no, not free trade. You can have trade, but it has to be fair trade. And we have to get something out of it. And they have to get something out of it, arguably, because it's trade, but it has to be on a level playing field. You don't exactly want to get ripped off 24/7 under the guise of cheap labor, and then you have all of these foreign countries that are buying up American land, and it's going to be a total disaster. And it's been like that, especially with China for quite some time, given the fact that they manipulate their currency. And then we've had these horrible trade deals like the NAFTA deal with Mexico and Canada that has negatively impacted a lot of our industry, sent a lot of automotive jobs south of the border. And these things will benefit Mexico, but they're not exactly going to benefit our country. And that's a major problem, and we need to do everything possible to go out there and renegotiate them. And we can find a way. It's like the salary cap. You can find a way. You can always find a way if you actually care. They don't find a way. They're weak. They're dumb. And the unique appeal of Donald Trump is that he went out there and he just said, I'm just going to do it. And in many cases, during his presidency, he just did it. Could it have been better? Absolutely. But in many cases, he was the greatest president of our lifetimes, at least in the Zoomer generation. Some of the boomers will point towards somebody like Reagan, or some of the people that are older than that may even say somebody like Eisenhower for whatever reason. But in our lifetimes, I'd have to say that Trump is the best president we've had, and somebody who actually put America first more so than any other president, who was just a blind globalist shill, whether if it was the Bushes or Clinton or Obama. Dustin Carner says, if DeSantis wins, will Trump respect it and tell voters to vote for him, or will he run third party out of spite? Well, that would ruin his legacy, I think, in many ways, because he doesn't stand a chance as a third party if he loses a primary, of course. But I think if DeSantis somehow finds a way to win, it would include a Trump implosion, and I think at that point he would have really no choice but to respect it. He might fade away. He might not campaign down the stretch. I do think that you would have that problem with a lot of these Trump voters, only Trumpers in places like Wisconsin, Pennsylvania staying home. I think it would negatively impact DeSantis. And I do think if he wins the primary, it's going to be hard for him to win an election in terms of DeSantis. I don't think it's a cakewalk for Trump either. I think 2024, even with Biden's unpopularity, regardless who the nominee is, it's likely going to go down the wire. It's likely going to be a very, very close election. And this is something that a lot of people need to understand. It's not going to be a cakewalk or a landslide. We're not going to be doing the 400 electoral vote semi-ironic videos, even though those would be pretty fun and probably bring in a lot of views. But what we are going to be doing is we're going to be analyzing it at face value. Of course, you can't trust polls anymore, regardless of what direction they're in. Money mattered in 2022 more than we thought it would, but in a presidential year does tend to matter quite a bit less. And the nuance will get lost on a lot of people, especially the neocons who will come in here and say, well, your predictions were wrong, we're not going to listen to you, when it's like you also predicted like 260 Republican House seats and 54 Republican Senate seats, and you had Doug Mastriano losing by less than I had Mastriano losing by. But those are the people that are going to come in here and usually try to claim like I have no credibility. It's going to be those people even more so now than it is the people on the left, ironically enough, which is pretty funny. But either way, I don't care what they have to say because they've been wrong time and time again. They don't have really their soul in any fight to save this country. They care more about red dots on a map more so than anything else. And even then, they don't even know how to achieve that properly. So yeah, whatever. But yeah, thanks for the super chats. Sports Highlight says, if it's Haley or Bolton, would you vote for Biden? No, I'm not. I would never vote for Biden. It's not going to be Haley or Bolton. They'll never get through a primary. But if that happened, I'd probably vote third party and then vote Republican down ballot is what I would do. But either way, I think that would screw our possible chances at taking the Senate back, especially with lower turnout and more ticket splitting in places like West Virginia, Ohio, Montana. Wouldn't really end very well. Garrett Vranikar says, should the GOP run on bringing back insane asylums? It would solve homelessness, reduce crime, drug market, clean up cities, and add jobs. Plus, it's great optics against blue-haired Dems. Well, I will say that there is definitely a positive in that. I think that if you had a society that would have these insane asylums, and if Nixon L right there, didn't go out of his way to shut them down, we'd be far better off. The problem was if you have like government-run insane asylums that are going to be taken over by these liberal bureaucrats, what are they going to do? They're going to go out there and say, well, if you happen to not believe that transgenders are valid, you're going to be going to the insane asylum. Oh, if you say anything that's remotely what they call racist or whatever, which they think everything is racist, they're going to put you in the mental asylum, and they're going to put a lot of law-abiding, well-meaning citizens in these mental asylums. So I don't really know if it's the best idea. I think that if we bring them back, if we have power, if we have institutional power, if they're going to be used for good and for like legitimate medical reasons, and they're going to do everything that you claim that they would do, yeah, I think it would be a good idea. But note that if you have these like government insane asylums that are going to be run largely by left-wing government officials, well, what's exactly going to happen? It's not going to end very well. So it would depend on how it's done, but it is a very good question. Based Alaskan said J.D. Vance is the future of what the GOP should be. I like J.D. Vance a lot, actually. I can't disagree with that. And he's done a good job in the Senate, 100%. I'd like to see him potentially be on a ticket in the future as well. Probably not 2024, but maybe 2028. If not at the top of the ticket as a VP, but he definitely would be in consideration. He has a good life story. And I think that his election victory was understated. He didn't campaign much, which you could say is kind of an L on his part. But still, he won by close to 7 points while being vastly outspent by a Democratic candidate who was virtually created in a lab. And, I mean, he also just went out there and didn't really pivot either. And he did well in places in Ohio and did better than Trump even in some counties. He kind of bombed a little bit in like the Appalachian part, which is ironic given his traditional appeal there. But maybe it's because Ryan focused on it. Maybe it's because Ryan just had traditional ancestral Dem appeal more so than your average Democrat would. I don't know. But it was all a grift, and Vance won big. So good for Vance. We love Vance. He's one of the senators that follows me on Twitter. Knight says you're downplaying DeSantis. He's pushed to ban China from buying land in Florida and against Ukraine. Maybe 10 legislative accomplishments of Hawley versus DeSantis. Well, it's easy to say that you have like a legislative accomplishment if you're a governor compared to if you're a senator. Obviously, you propose a lot of legislation that doesn't exactly get passed. But even so, pushing to ban these things or making statements against Ukraine like he did, which he's made a lot of far more statements against Russia that would kind of insinuate that he wants to get involved, and they're kind of along the lines of these neocons who want to send a lot of money to Ukraine or whatever. So I don't exactly know if you could even say that those two are accomplishments, because, Hawley is just a type of guy who goes out there and says things performatively because he's in the Senate. That's what you're insinuating, I assume, by this super chat. And then you're saying, well, DeSantis doing the same thing is different because he's a governor, even though he hasn't signed a lot of legislation that has been anything more than a toothless performative gesture. Oh, what's he doing now? He's signing this bill that's going to prevent you from talking about gay sex until you're in the 4th grade. Why are schools talking about it at all? That's my question. So I don't know. I don't think I'm downplaying him. I like a lot of what he's done. I think he's been very good in terms of moving the Overton window at the state level. I think he's kind of been the symbol of effective leadership, even though if that symbol has been overstated, it's kind of driven the drive for a lot more conservatives to crave these strong men leading these states, pushing for solid legislation, getting things done. But I'm not going to sit back here and say, I'm going to make him president. He's better than Trump. He's super eluctable. His record in Congress just doesn't matter. Because it doesn't. And Hawley has had a lot of effective accomplishments. Maybe not legislative-wise, but if you talk about as Attorney General, legal accomplishments in Missouri, he had quite a few of them. I'd encourage you to look into his record. Taking on companies, taking on pharmaceutical companies, etc. They're all there. Christopher Laurie says, with the bank failures last week, where do you think conservatives should stand in the Federal Reserve? Should we dissolve it like libertarians say, or something else? Well, when you got rid of the gold standard, which again, some people will say we can't go back to. Some people will say it's not viable. You saw a lot of economic metrics that were very solid for the lower middle class and the middle class kind of dissipate. And I don't consider that to be a very good thing. And you talk about these banks failing. You talk about these bailouts, which are encouraging bad behavior from these banks and could very well lead us into another 2008-style recession. I'm not a big fan of it. I think that you need to go to a certain standard. I don't know if it's going to be a gold standard. Maybe it would be like a mineral standard. You could have silver. You could have all these things, whatever. We're going to have to look into it. But I do believe that we probably could do without the Fed, or at least reform it significantly. I'm not going to say I'm the biggest expert on how things go in the Fed, but it does seem as if it is a lot more of a headache for economic policy than something that's actually benefiting us at this time. And our currency is not exactly backed up by anything at the moment. It's just standing there on its own. And I don't really consider that to be a very healthy thing. And I think that we need to be backing it up with something. And you can see returns over time increase with our currency. It could actually mean something. Imperium Magistrate says, can we just take over Mexico? No, I don't think that's a good idea. I mean, isn't that like the Kanye plan? Like just taking over everything south of the border? Obviously, like we've heard like talks about, we need to unite with Canada. I don't think that's a good idea either. I don't think that's a good idea. So it is the way it is. Dustin Carner says, thoughts on Youngkin or Kemp for VP, maybe Bill Lee. I mean, I don't think that those would be the worst options, honestly. I think if you have a Trump-Youngkin ticket, it could be very solid. Youngkin kind of does soften the image a little bit with Trump. He's from a state like Virginia. He's had electoral success. And for Virginia, I think he's been pretty solid for that state, which is a state that voted for Biden by 10. No, I don't necessarily think that every single statement he's ever made in his entire life is like super based or anything like that, but I don't necessarily think you're going to find that person, and if they exist, I don't think they're going to be Trump's VP. Bill Lee, I don't know much about him. I think he's done some solid things from what I can tell, but you do have a lot of liberal industry moving into Nashville. A similar thing with Kemp in Georgia. I don't think he's like the most rhino governor in the world, like a lot of people have said over the past few years, but still, he did pass a lot of solid legislation because he had a primary challenger, not necessarily because he like wanted to out of the bottom of his heart or whatever. And Georgia, despite not being a border state, has more illegals than Arizona. This is the same guy who's led the state for the past 4 or 5 years. Same guy with the commercial back in 2018 that said, I've got this truck to round up the criminal illegal aliens and take them back myself. Yep, I just said that. That's Brian Kemp, but has he governed that way? Maybe not. Not so much, but thanks for the super chat. But as for our VP, I think you could do a lot worse. I'd rather have Kemp than Noam, and that's saying something. Salvador says, what about Trump and Mike Pompeo? Pompeo for VP would be a disaster. He's another neocon. He's another one in the mix. And he's arguably going to run for president, and it's not going to end very well. Samuel Harrison says, what do you think Trump's best strategy for winning Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, Arizona, Georgia, and Nevada should be? Well, I don't know if you're going to win all of those states, if I'm going to be completely honest with you. But in terms of getting it done, you have to really hammer home the messaging that I'm still the guy that's going to fight for you. Biden promised northeastern Pennsylvania, where he's from, because you wanted to kind of steer away from that direction in 2020. Now you're going to lean into it. He's from eastern Pennsylvania. He's failed eastern Pennsylvania with his nonsense, his globalist policies. The economy is shattering. The inflation is through the roof. All of these things are going on. I'm going to get back here. I'm going to fight for you. You're going to have a fighter in the White House once again. Give me another chance for 4 more years. And I mean, there you go. I mean, in terms of the Rust Belt states, it's a very similar thing. Arizona, Georgia, and Nevada, I think the best strategy for all those states, to be honest, would just be the ballot harvesting operation. Because if you do that in Nevada and match the Dems with that, you're not going to lose. Embrace early voting in AZ in Georgia. You're not going to have to worry at the 11 and a half hour that there's going to be some malfunctions on E-Day. So take advantage of it, get it done, win, and go from there. Sam Madsen said, will the gun bills that Dems are pushing in Michigan affect the state in 24? I don't think they're going to be super popular. Michigan is kind of, I mean, it's a pro-gun state pretty much. There's a lot of gun ranges. There's a lot of hunting that takes place in northern Michigan. A lot of people do use AR-15s for that as well because they're easy, they're lightweight, they're fun, they're good for home defense. And Michigan kind of leaning into the whole gun control thing in the trifecta, I don't think that's going to help them out very much. I think it depends on the bill that's passed, but I think you're going to anger a lot of people, and whoever the Republican nominee is would be wise to capitalize on that, but will it actually mean anything? I don't know. We'll have to see. But again, turnout operation matters. There's nothing in Michigan. The Michigan GOP is a disaster. It's in shambles. And honestly, we have a lot of work to do on our hands. And I think Trump would be the best bet to win Michigan because I think he can kind of transcend the traditional GOP. It doesn't matter. You could have a dog running the Michigan Republican Party, and Trump could still be competitive there with his just energy and his own support base that he has. But he's going to have to do a lot in order to win that state, and it's not really a guarantee. It's basically North Carolina, but for the Democrats instead of for Republicans. In 2016 was the 2008, one could say. John Waffle, H2P, says, do you think we need to go teach the Native Americans about Trump to get New Mexico and Arizona? You're not going to win New Mexico and Arizona via the Native American base. Trust me, there are some tribes that are more Republican-friendly than not, but either way, it's not a priority. You're better off, honestly, trying to go for Hispanics than you are going for Native American voters. So, Yad says, is Pedro Gonzalez a dissimp? From what I can tell, yes, because, and you have this phenomenon with some of these more populist type of figures, and I've really never really had a problem with Pedro personally over the past few years that we've been mutuals on Twitter or whatever. But I will say that there is this TDS, and I think a lot of these people may have wanted positions in Trump's administration, never got them, and they're just like seething about it. Because if Trump does something, it's the worst thing ever. If DeSantis does the same thing, they're going to prop it up as like something solid or something good. Like, I don't exactly know what's happening there. Like, it's a little weird. You see, and like Pedro's very, very far left economically speaking. And I'm not like this free market absolutist kind of guy, of course, and most people know that by now. I'm somebody that's more of a pragmatist when it comes to economic issues. I have some views on economics that tend to be fairly right wing, and I have some views that are maybe not so right wing on economics. But either way, I'd say I lean right overall on the issue. And it's like Pedro is very left wing, and he'll just embrace all like the omnibus, maybe not all the omnibus spending, but he like kind of does embrace a lot of like the Bernie policies on economics. So I'm not surprised, but it's kind of weird that somebody like that would be backing somebody like Ron DeSantis, who's being funded by the Koch brothers, by the way, for his presidential run, and funded by Ken Griffin and all those establishment donors that people like Pedro and Ryan Gerdusky and all those people have written books trashing, and now they're kind of giving soft support to that guy. It's a little interesting what's going on there. DJ Aftershock says, who on ET has become them? I don't care, honestly. There's a lot of them. They're all pretty much cringeworthy. If all you do all day is spend time talking about, oh, this here, this election here, this election here, and that's their whole entire Twitter feed, which again, some of it is good, and I obviously am kind of like that guy to a large extent when it comes to election analysis on the right wing. But some of these people, they're just, all they do, they have like 200,000 tweets and their account is a year old. And it's all random election stuff and maps and like low grade effort memes. And it's like, yeah, this isn't content. Put the phone down, honestly. Like, if you noticed, I've been tweeting less. I probably tweet like, I don't know, 2 times a day maximum for the past few weeks or so. And it's only if it's something that's solid and something that's going to matter, a few months from now. But Dustin Carner says, do you think Michigan and Pennsylvania are swinging back left? Wisconsin, I think Michigan to an extent, a little bit. Pennsylvania's stagnant. I think Wisconsin's still moving right, but there's a lot that needs to be talked about for sure. R. Watkins says DeSantis is flip-flopping on Ukraine. When he was in Congress, he supported aid for them, but now since he's running, he's against aid. He's trying too hard to be a Trump populist, which can backfire. And it can, and you have people like Nikki Haley attacking him on it while simultaneously attacking Trump. I think Pence arguably is doing the same thing. And definitely aid to Ukraine back in 2017 was a little bit different than aid now because it was less money, but still signing off on that much foreign aid in general is something I have a problem with. I was never a fan of Donald Trump sending billions upon billions of dollars to a lot of these foreign countries who are, countries that don't entirely have our best interest in mind 100% of the time. Even if they are our supposed allies, what do? They take advantage of us left and right. So Salvador says, what do you think about Nayib Bukele? I don't know who that is or what that is, but thanks for the super chat. So if you guys have any more questions, feel free to send them in, by the way. We have 360 live viewers, and that's been pretty much stagnant the entire stream. So make sure you guys continue to support the stream. Like the stream, by the way. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Hit that bell as well. We'll continue the conversation. Stream is not ending just yet. We've been live for about an hour and 7 minutes, but we're not exactly going to end the stream right now. So who knows? We could also talk a little bit about what's going on in Pennsylvania. You have that whole Senate primary is a total train wreck. It does seem as if Doug Mastriano is going to jump in again. McCormick is going to jump in again. 2 people that probably are not going to be able to win for different reasons. Will Bob Casey run? That's another question, because if not, the field is wide open and the seat becomes a little bit more easy for Republicans to pick up. But other than that, I don't really know what's going on there. Buck Hunter 431 says, what are the future swing states? Well, I think what you have right now is going to be stagnant for a while. It's possible that you'll see Georgia not be as much of a swing state anymore. You'll see the state of Arizona potentially move off a cliff with what's happening there. But who knows? I think the Rust Belt is still going to be where elections are won. Hopefully, we will still have this electoral future. There's been a lot of talk about the electoral winter, some of which I think may be slightly overblown here and there, some of which is very warranted. I think it really depends on the future of Texas. Thankfully, Florida is not a swing state anymore. It does seem like North Carolina is not moving off a cliff to the left like a lot of people thought would happen after 2008. So, I don't know. We'll have to see. There's a lot that can happen. Rhode Island will move right. Delaware will move right. Kansas will move left. So there's a lot of things that will be likely to change. We'll see. But, okay, what else is going on? Nevada. Nevada, I think it depends. That could be a state where Republicans could make the new Florida if they really want to. But if they're not willing to engage in the electoral system, if they're not willing to ballot harvest, they're not exactly going to see themselves have a solid future in that state. But there still is hope. There still is. And you have a lot of conservatives that are from California that have moved into states like Nevada. They've moved into states, even Texas to a certain extent. A lot of the Californians that live in Texas do tend to lean a little bit more right. Pretty much everywhere outside of the Austin area, which has grown quite a bit. It's a very left-wing cultural center. One could say it's kind of like the San Francisco in the middle of Texas. Garrett Vranikar says, who do you endorse for the Pennsylvania Senate primary? I don't know. There's a lot we don't know. There's a lot of candidates that could jump in that would be fairly in the general election. I don't think McCormick is a good pick. Mastriano's a nice guy, but after seeing what happened in 2022, I don't know how anybody's going to sit back here and say that he's like going to take this seat away from Bob Casey. I just don't believe it's going to happen. So a lot of people are saying F's. I turned off the, we turned off the, what's it called, the camera for a second, but no, it's back. It should be back just fine. Mike M says, did you hear Scott Adams, the creator of Dilbert rant that got him canceled recently? If so, what are your thoughts? I thought it was very crass. But the logic of what he was saying was that if you have all of these people that say that being a certain race or ethnic group is bad, why would you want to be around them, is what he was saying. And I don't exactly see why that's that controversial, because if you have 50% of white people that say it's not okay to be black, and then you have some black guy that's like, stay away from those honkies or whatever, like nobody's going to bat an eye. Nobody's going to care. So why should I care if he's going to say it? Why should he be canceled if he says it? That's my question. And I don't really think it's all that controversial. I think the way he said it was very crass, but that's the way that Scott Adams is. I think Scott Adams is somebody who does tend to say a lot of things in a very crass manner, and he pissed off a lot of conservatives, myself included, because he was one of the jab cucks or whatever, and then he apologized for it, whatever, but like, it is what it is. But, it was a little bit crass. Would you word it that way? Maybe not. But when you look into what he was actually saying, especially if you reverse the roles, is it really that controversial? Is what he's saying really that evil? Like, I don't know. I don't really see it that way. So, who knows? Do we have any member chats? We have one. Based Cato, who's been a member for 31 months, by the way. You guys got to be like him. Become a member on YouTube if you want the badge, but also become a member on the website. You get the Discord server. You get all my articles. You get all my exclusive videos. I have 1 to 2 videos a week that are not posted on my channel. They're full length. You can get them, by the way, on the website at redeaglepolitics.com for $5 a month, which is a coffee a month or 16 cents a day. But that's enough for the shameless plug. Based Cato says, thoughts on the next political persecution of Blumph going on with Stormy Daniels in New York. Yeah, it's just tiring, man. None of this stuff has amounted to anything. They could easily have had him for something if there really was something that was even remotely worth putting him away, especially because they have the entire apparatus against the guy. They could do anything that they possibly could do to get him. They could even frame the guy, but still they haven't been able to find anything. So they're going back to things that have already been raised 5 years ago that have already failed consistently. It's a mess. All right, Yes Man says, has anyone really ever been far, even has decided to want to do more? I don't know. I don't know what that means. It's a little bit of a word salad. I appreciate the super chat, but has anyone really ever been far, even as decide? Yeah, that's a word salad to me. I'm sorry. Garrett Vranikar says, COVID crippled NYC. I think is the start of a decline. Would that make it more of a swing state in the future? It's weird because it moved to the right, even though you have all of these New Yorkers moving to Florida and other states too, like Texas, Arizona, etc. But still, New York has moved to the right. I don't know if people are just like waking up or what exactly is going on, or you have more conservatives voting, or maybe you do have some liberals that are fleeing to other states. I don't know what the deal is there, but you do have kind of this decline. You see crime rising. You see a lot of people getting angry with the leadership. And we'll see if the trend continues into a presidential year. I know coattails down ballot do matter quite a bit, but still, it's like you did see the Senate race with Schumer, who's been that electoral juggernaut, against somebody who's like a MAGA candidate, didn't really raise a lot of money. That was closer than the Pennsylvania gubernatorial race. And then you see George Santos winning by 8 in like a Biden +8 seat. And then you see all these other things happen. And it's like, maybe at the federal level, there is going to be some hope that it could be closer. And maybe some of these long shot flips in Congress could stay. I don't know. Now you have Cuomo wanting to primary out Gillibrand. And it's like the guy left in disgrace. And now he wants to make his political comeback and primary out the senator that's up for grabs in 2024. Who knows what's going on? Vince Dow in chat says, stop using StreamYard. It sucks. Well, what do you use? That's a good question because, you were the one that actually got me into using StreamYard because of the super chats popped up on the screen. And I like it. I think that it could be better. But if there's anything better out there than StreamYard, I'd be open to hearing about it. Mole Playing Rough says, what's Anthony Sabatini's political future looking like? Well, he could run for Congress again. He could, run for another state legislature position. He could run for a lot of things. He could raise his profile. He could work in a future administration. I think there's a lot of things he could be doing. That was a sad primary loss. And I know Corey Mills has not exactly been as bad as I thought he would be so far, even though it is pretty early. So it really doesn't look like he's going to be primarying him out at this point, but it is interesting to see what's going to happen with him because he does have a lot of great ideas. He's definitely a good fighter. And I would like to see him in Congress or in some position of power in the state of Florida within the coming few years. Hover says, you think it would be possible to flip a state like New Jersey red, not at the presidential level? They almost did it at the state level in 2021. Dustin Carner says, is New Hampshire out of reach? Republicans barely kept their trifecta. It's an uphill climb for sure. They don't like incumbents, though, so maybe there's hope. But I don't think that they're really going to be the biggest fan of Trump either. Like, he got 46% when he almost won the state. Big third-party share of the electorate that did come home for Biden. So we'll see. Christopher Laurie says, I never thought Kansas would go blue, but seeing how dumb the GOP there is, also seeing Delaware go red after Biden goes would be satisfying. Yeah, look at the midterms in Delaware. It was closer than you thought it would be. Garrett Vranikar says, insane asylum's good if they're state-run. Well, it depends. And I know you can make the same argument with our judicial system in general or prisons or whatever. So maybe my initial take was not ideally thought through because I never really thought it out in full. But, I mean, I think that they are a net positive. I think that, like I said, if they are used for good, then we can keep a lot of people in these asylums, not on the streets. And obviously, there's a lot of people on the streets, just especially within the Democrat voter base, by the way, who should be in insane asylums. And I think we know exactly who those people are. It's like you know it when you see it type of thing. OBS. Well, I used OBS for the entirety of my career, one could say, on YouTube up until about a year ago. or two. So maybe I'll have to return to it. I definitely have OBS. I'm going to need some like overlay or something like that, but I think it could be done. I do like StreamYard. I like putting the super chats on the screen. If I could find a way to do that, I think OBS would be ideal. I don't know. We'll have to see. But it's cool. Guy Rice says, do you think Hobbs will get recalled? It's possible. I'd like to see her get recalled. I don't know who it's going to be by. I don't know if Carrie Lake is going to run again or who exactly they'll put up there, but I'd be down. I'd be 100% down. Branch Covidian 19 says, what is the political future of Illinois? Do you think it will trend red? I actually do, but probably not by enough to really make a difference. It was shocking seeing Bailey get so close. He only lost by 12? That's a closer margin than Mastriano over in Pennsylvania. And Bailey and him were kind of seen in a very similar light. So who knows? Make my own overlays and import them. Well, I'm working on that. I'm definitely going to be working on it. I want to improve the brand. We're going to put a team together to take clips of the stream, and they'll obviously send it to me. We'll potentially make them into shorts. We'll make them into videos that could be put on the second channel as live show clips, and we'll go from there for sure. But if you guys want to help out, join the Discord. If we get people in the Discord that can help clip parts of the stream that are useful, that are insightful, that are going to enhance people's minds, that are going to make them learn something, I'd love for them to help out for sure. I think that could be a good thing. Did I see? Yes, I did see the Yankee Perspective cabinet video. I agreed with most of it. I don't like the idea of Rick Grinnell as Secretary of State, but in terms of the, abiding to the whole realistic argument or whatever, I could understand why that would probably be the realistic option, which I'm not thrilled with. And like I say, I criticize Trump quite a bit even now. I'm not thrilled with all of the people in his circle. I like a lot of people in his circle, and a lot of people in his circle like me, a lot more so than was the case back in 2020, both ways on that argument. But I will say that there are some people like Grinnell, like Graham, that are in his circle that I'm not a fan of, that I don't like, that need to get out of his circle ideally, that should be nowhere near his ear. But at the same time, you have people in every single presidential candidate running for office like that in their ear. And I'm not a fan of that either. And I'm definitely not a fan of a lot of the people in DeSantis's corner that are doing everything possible to just be as insufferable as possible and attack Trump like they're resist libs from 2017. So Salvador says, can you comment on Tucker Carlson in January 6th? Well, I commented on this on the last stream, but I'll reiterate it again in case you weren't there. I did see the comments or the text messages, and I don't really know what to make of them. One could say they're a heat of the moment thing. One could say that that's genuinely how he feels, which would be odd because he golfed with him last year with MTG, and they were all having a good time. And he praised Trump on the recent Nelk podcast he did, which was a very interesting watch. But, I mean, it's possible they're also manufactured. But if they are true, I think that they both really serve roles that are useful in this movement. And I'm not going to throw Tucker to the wolves because, he trashed Trump once in his life. Just like I'm not going to say Chip Roy's a horrendous congressman, because he's not, even though he cucked on the 1-6 issue, and that was a very bad thing for him. And also politically, because then it made Trump want to choose Stefanik to replace Liz Cheney, and that wasn't a good thing either. So I'm not really a fan of what was said by Tucker if it's true, but it is what it is. Shout out to Mike M for becoming a new member. Thank you, Mike M. He now has the badge. Garrett Vrankar says, Vince James made a video on how to get base politicians in, join clubs, move up, set endorsement cards in your district, get involved in your local Republican club. Yeah, I think that that's true in general. And I've said this over the past, probably every stream for the past couple months that I've done. You need people getting involved in the lower levels and the lower echelons of parties at local levels, county levels, even state parties, and
low positions, precinct committeemen, whatever, and then you need to work your way up. You need to have people that want to run, that are capable of running for political office, running for school boards, and then you need people that are going to have credentials and connections to become state representatives and state senators, and then from there, congressmen, senators, governors, statewide officials. It has to be a ground up thing. It's going to take some time. We're going to have a certain level of patience, no doubt, in order to actually transform the Republican Party and make it a solid, authentically America First conservative party. That part is very true. Darth Vader 33 says, do you think China will support will support Russia militarily in Ukraine? I don't know yet. Definitely, if you keep pushing Russia into their corner, it's possible, which would again start World War III. Also, the AUKUS is a threat to China sending subs to Australia. What do you think China's response will be? Hashtag Trump Lake 2024. I think it depends how much Russia's pushed into their corner. That's for sure. China's been trolling countries for a while. They've trolled the U.S. with the balloon or whatever, and then you saw like the generic conservatives like posting all these memes about it or whatever. I'm sure it was a troll. I don't think it's like a serious threat. If China wants to find something out, I don't think they need to send a giant weather balloon into our skies in order to do so. But I mean, still, it's crazy. I mean, they are going to be sending their warning shots here and there. They're going to be doing their trolling, whatever. And the more we're going to be pushing Russia into their corner, they're going to create that alliance that does want to destroy us. I'm not one of those people that's going to say, I want war with China. We must do everything we can do to protect Taiwan or whatever. I see China as an adversary who takes advantage of us, and potentially conflict could escalate. I want to de-escalate that conflict. I think we need to get along with China. Honestly, I think we need to get along with Russia. That's what I do. I believe. I think that these leaders sometimes don't have our best interests in mind, and they definitely don't. And you could say maybe they do this base thing here, this base thing there in terms of China. I know Russia does it more so. I'm a lot more friendly to Russia than I am to China. But like the reason why they do like masculinity training in China, which is pretty cool and based, is because they want to do everything they possibly can do to make their own citizenry strong. So they are posing an active threat to us. And then they send all of their garbage propaganda like TikTok over here. If you go on TikTok on China, they ban a lot of the, even like remotely sexual type of stuff there. But when it comes to what is displayed on our phones at the hands of China, yeah, it's exactly not the same thing. It's this algorithm that's meant to trap people in, so they just keep scrolling for hours upon hours upon hours on end for dopamine. It's keeping the population weaker. Not exactly a good thing, but that's just part of the plan, one could say. And I don't want war with them. I'd rather get along with them, but you're gonna have to make sure that they're playing by our rules too. They got to understand that we are still that force, not militarily speaking, that's policing the world, but that we're a strong nation who's not really going to be privy to the propaganda, and we're still gonna have the upper hand here and there, and we're not gonna let them take our jobs, our manufacturing away, among other things. Dustin Carner says, why do rurals in New England stick out by being blue as much as urban areas, places like Vermont and other areas? It's the same reason why northwestern Wisconsin is rural and is still very blue, because you have a lot of college-educated New York or Boston type of voters that have moved out of Boston or New York and have gone to these places. You have a lot of hippies, even like the non-college educated population in places like Vermont. A lot of them are very culturally liberal hippies. They're not very religious. If they are, they're like maybe Catholic, but they don't even go to church. They don't go to mass unless it's like Christmas or Easter. They call them the CEOs or whatever. But that's pretty much about it. And the ethnic demography of it's a little bit different. You have a lot more like, I don't know, like Irish, like anti-populist historically voters up there, which might vote differently than those types of voters in places like Indiana, for example. I don't know. But it is what it is. You have an interesting demographic issue, not necessarily racial demographics because they're all pretty much white, but the sub-demographics, the educational demographics, the religious demographics as well. That's definitely the biggest one. So, yep. Okay, let's see. Anything else in chat? Trump should use Garcia. No use pandering to women voters. Gender gap only growing. Latinos, there's ground to be gained. Well, I'd be fine with Garcia for VP. I think that'd be a good option. I'm not going to choose him because, I think he's going to like appeal to Latinos massively, because I don't think that's really going to move the needle on its own. But I do believe Garcia would be a solid pick. And again, he does kind of have this Sunbelt appeal. He kind of does have this suburban appeal to a certain extent. And I think that he could be solid VP material. He's, obviously kind of has a Youngkin type of thing going on where he's in this Biden plus 12, 13 district, but he won big in 2022. It was a ridiculous disparity. And even though a couple of his votes the past Congress I wasn't a big fan of, still overall his voting record is in the top half of Republican congressmen, and he's like in the second or third most Democratic district that has a Republican congressman. That's a good thing, obviously. And I'd be fine with that. Sam Madsen said far northwestern Wisconsin's basically the eastern Iron Range, which makes it blue too. Well, it depends. Like the Iron Range counties that moved in favor of Trump in 2016 are vastly different than those three. And definitely you have those counties up in northeastern Minnesota that are culturally different than the rest of the Iron Range. Similarly, how you have those counties in northwestern Wisconsin who are, voting differently than some of the other counties in northern Wisconsin. So DJ Aftershock says majority English and French Canadian towns in New England vote or lean GOP, while the Irish Italian towns lean very blue. This is also very true. Garrett Vrankar says, if Doug won, would that have affected the U.S. ability to supply gas and oil to Europe? First of all, I thought this was talking about Doug Mastriano for a second. And since he lost, will that U.S. failure to supply oil turn Europe against U.S. in the near future? What Doug exactly? What Doug? I'm kind of confused. Thought he was talking about Doug Mastriano, but apparently there's some other Doug. If Doug won, what Doug? It is Mastriano? How? How would Mastriano have any effect on the ability for us to supply gas and oil to Europe? I just don't get it. I literally don't understand how that relates. I mean, you could say what, because Pennsylvania would like frack more or something like that. I mean, that's like the only thing that I could think of that would relate to it. But I don't even know if Shapiro is really that big on being anti-fracking. So I don't think that the two relate. It's like an apples to oranges type thing. I mean, like if Shapiro really is cracking down on fracking, you could say it might have a minor net negative, but it's not like Pennsylvania is the only state that's going to be fracking. So probably isn't going to do that much. And what is being fracked there? Is it necessarily petroleum, or is it like natural gas that'll like actually like heat up homes? It's going to be different than, gas that's going to be put in people's cars, obviously. So it does play a role. So I guess it does. I guess there could be a low key thing, but probably is not going to be a whole lot of a difference in regards to oil production there. What can I say? But from what I can tell, Shapiro hasn't done anything about fracking that I've really seen. So, all right. I mean, that's pretty much it. If you guys have any more super chats, feel free to send them, but we're going to end the stream in about a couple of minutes or so. So I thank everyone for tuning in. Make sure you guys do like the stream. Make sure you guys do subscribe to the channel. Make sure you guys hit the bell for notifications so you don't miss another stream. You want to be here every Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday. I'll be back with a regular video, more likely than not tomorrow, and then probably another one Friday or Saturday, and then we're going to be doing our Sunday stream, and that's kind of the way it's going to go. So Sam Madsen said, no, I know the precinct data. For example, Mellon, Wisconsin, old iron mining town of 200 people. That's 50-50 despite being very white working class. Might be a union thing, actually. Could be a union thing. We don't want to appeal to those types of unions in terms of the bad unions, but you're going to have to appeal to the workers in the auto unions, the steel unions, the mining unions, which I think Trump did in places like Pennsylvania, West Virginia. I don't know about Wisconsin. Doesn't seem like there's a lot of mining taking place up there in Wisconsin, but It is true. Although I will say that there are counties or a lot of precincts in those counties in northwestern Wisconsin that are more college educated uh, in terms of the educational makeup. But that's the way I see it. But you're gonna have to do something to appeal to these workers. You could appeal to them without like supporting the unions that have been very culturally left, that have not been really any cultural benefit to this country. They haven't benefited the workers economically. A lot of them just shill for mass immigration. They shill for a lot of the worst policies that even negatively affect workers, which is a massive issue. And that's true. So Dustin Carner says personal 2022 L, LePage and Walker for me were letdowns. I think that if Lake and Laxalt won, I probably would have viewed the night a lot differently than I would be viewing it right now, because at least you would have got over the hump in Nevada, and then Arizona, you would have overcome a lot, and we know what that is, to get the best governor in the country in office, but we were not able to get that, unfortunately, and that kind of was the low blow, because then you'd be focusing on Senate control. You wouldn't be able to sit back here and put the blame on Blumpf as easily. You would have possibly seen an outside chance at winning the runoff in Georgia. You would have potentially had that, Senate there. Who really knows? But it is what it is. You can't change the past, but what you can do, you can change the future. And we'll leave it on that note. We'll leave it on a high note. We will change the future ahead of 2024. So anyways, guys, thanks for watching. Like the stream, subscribe, hit the bell before you go. I'll see you guys next time. Red Eagle, out.